How's everyone doing tonight?
How's it going, everyone? Going
Hey
good.
guys. How are you, Dr. Ramos? Good.
Do you
Good.
want to start interpretation maybe? It's not on yet.
Pretty good. Hema, are you ready to start interpretation, please? Recovering from the 4th of July? Yes.
Yes. We had a very, I don't know what the weather was like for you, Dr. Ramos, but for the Valley, considering what July can look like, we had a very mild, it's getting hot now, but we had a very mild 4th of July, which was lovely. That weekend, last weekend was really nice.
Nice.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Interpretation's on now, but I'm not assigned. If you can please assign me the one that says Spanish interpreter Tania Lingüística. Please and thank you.
Also me, the one that says Spanish interpreter Emilia.
Yes. Tonight, Hema is facilitating. Let's see here. Hema, if you can assign the controls to Jessica, so we could do that.
It was Emilia, and which one was the other one?
Tanya?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, welcome. Apologies for the delay. My full disclosure, my sons had to come up early from school today, so apologies for that. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to be facilitating today's meeting. I'm new to the company with Harder and Company Community Research. I joined just this May, so I'm actually going to do a little bit of an introduction, and we're going to kick it off today. Hope everyone's having a good day. And hello to any other children that we have in your home, because I know a lot of us are still working from home, so welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to start us off. And I'm going to actually start by sharing a little bit about myself, what brought me to this work, what brought me to AB617, and specifically a little bit about my background. Okay, so let me go ahead and share the PowerPoint slides for today to kick us off. Okay, can we all see the screens? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and actually get started by sharing a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. Colonia. I graduated from UC Berkeley, actually, where I was doing some work on equity and inclusion there. So that's sort of been my background in the area that I've been sort of really focusing on. Well, most importantly, though, I think there's also sort of my kind of upbringings that kind of makes it really personal for me, this work of AB617. My dad actually came to the US through the Vegetative program. He was a farm worker in various parts of California. So I actually grew up with him, sort of waking up every morning at 4 a.m. And some of the issues discussed in these meetings, specifically with regards to pesticides, right? Clean air were very sort of pertinent growing up in a farm working household and as a first generation. So I think for me, it's important to sort of note that part of the making this work equitable is sort of what grounds me, right? In terms of that familiar background. So let's just kind of share that and share a little bit about me and sort of kind of what brings me to this work. I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you for trusting me. I'm very new to the group, but thank you for having me here today. Joining me today also is Dr. Amy Ramos and my colleagues, Jessica and Vanessa, who you know Jessica, who's facilitated other sessions here. So welcome in terms of that. Additionally, I think I want to give a little bit of background or a roadmap of what we're going to be focusing on today and sort of where we want to put our energy, right? We're going to go ahead and after this kind of focus specifically on some of the action items, right? We're also going to focus on something that has been sort of transcending since April, which is finalizing a set of group agreements, right? And sort of how do we make those equitable and very sort of personal to this particular community. And then we're going to transition onto SORP incentives measures. From there, we'll go to standing updates. We have a couple of updates, and then we'll wrap up and sort of provide some dates for the next agenda setting and our next meeting for next month, right? And finally, we'll conclude with some comments from the community, okay? I also want to give in terms of a reminder that this community does not have a co-host, right? So I want to encourage you all to kind of think about that, right? In terms of sort of passing on the baton to someone within the community in terms of sort of serving in that co-host position, right? So kind of want to just put it out there, right? In terms of if that's something that would be empowering to you, that sort of would sit well, right? To think about that possibility of serving as a co-host. If you have questions about that role, sort of what it entails, what it would look like, definitely you can reach out to me or anyone else in the team to sort of think about you potentially kind of playing that leadership role of serving as a co-host, okay? So let's go ahead and I'm gonna give a couple of housekeeping items, just reminders. We've sort of been navigating this remote world a lot. So I'm gonna give some just friendly reminders here. So the first one, right? If you are not speaking or you don't have the mic, to remember to mute yourself as we kind of shared in the beginning, right? To make sure that your name is displayed in terms of for attendance purposes. And if you could provide your first and last name there. And then this is in Spanish, and I am bilingual, but I know we have the translation. Spanish is actually my first language, so but this is also sort of the reminder of that in Spanish, to put your name, first and last name. Okay. And now I'm going to pass it on to Linguistica to sort of give the background of this for the translation.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. As usual, we are providing Spanish interpretation. So if you are a monolingual English speaker, we do encourage you to please select the English channels. That way you can hear any communication from Spanish into English. If you are using a computer, you will see a globe at the bottom of your screen. Select the English channel. If you are using a cell phone or a tablet, you need to tap your screen. You will see 3 little dots with the word more. You need to select language interpretation, select English, and at the top you need to select done. That way you can hear the simultaneous interpretation. Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos. Como siempre estamos proveyendo interpretación al español. Si usted está utilizando una computadora, usted va a ver un icono de un mundo en la parte baja de su pantalla. Seleccione el canal de español. Si usted está utilizando un teléfono móvil o una tableta, tiene que tocar su pantalla. Va a seleccionar los 3 puntitos donde dice más o more. Seleccione interpretación de idioma. Después seleccione español y por último en la parte de arriba el botón azul que dice listo, done o finalizar para que pueda escuchar la junta completamente en español. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And now I'm going to pass it on to Jessica Olsen. Jessica, if you have any sort of opening remarks for today's meeting. Want to give you this space to do so?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Cardona. And I want to welcome everyone. I really appreciate you all being here. I know it's the middle of summer and some folks take off. And so it just really shows the dedication and all of the work we've been meeting for 2.5 years. And just seeing all of you here month after month really does mean a lot to us. We have a lot to get to today in terms of getting feedback from you all. It really is a meeting, as was mentioned at the beginning, about following up on several things. And so it was mentioned earlier, not only on our group agreements, but also on making decisions together about moving some funding around. I will just say right now, and I will iterate a couple of times, this is not the only part of the only time we ever have this conversation. It's actually probably the beginning of the conversation. So there's a couple of decisions we'll make today. We might make some more at the next meeting, and we'll kind of take it piece by piece with some input. So I want you to all just really take that to consideration today, and if we don't come to decisions today, that's okay. We're open to just having conversations. I don't want pressure on this group. I definitely want it to be a consensus and to really feel comfortable with some of the decisions we're making. So I'm saying that because I want us to have a great meeting. I think we really will, and we're really looking forward to the discussion. And then I will also put in a plug. If you find, maybe it's been a while, even if you've hosted it before and you find that you want to be a part of developing the agenda and working with the great facilitation team on running our next meeting, please drop it in the chat, email one of us, let us know, or volunteer right now. We'd love to share this space with you. But with that, I'll pass it back to you, Hema.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and great point, Jessica. I think that's important, especially for today's group agreement that I'll be leading, right? That I'll sort of post that same sentiment of nothing has to be finalized, so it can be a dialogue, or we can definitely put that on the notes for the next meeting. So thank you for making that point. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on now to Song for the review of the action items. I want to give a little bit of background, just friendly reminders of the purpose of the action items, right? In terms of how they serve specifically for promoting transparency and accountability, right? I think it's important to sort of remind you all that this is your space, what you want to sort of place forward, right? So that tracker is to sort of keep accountable what has been done, what has not been done, and what we need to sort of move forward in terms of doing, right? In terms of what's more salient and important for you all. So I think I want to kind of ground that in terms of those sort of aspects. And now, Song, if you can sort of provide sort of any updates with regard to the tracker items, I'll go ahead and pass the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Hema. Yes, we've got quite a few items for the action item, and I'm going to share my screen here. So let me go ahead and do that. Can you guys see the running action item list right now on the screen? Does it look all right? Perfect. Okay, so we've got quite a few from the last meeting, which was on June 13th.
Can you zoom in a little bit, please?
Okay, sure. Does this look okay right here?
Perfect. I think that's better. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so for the first one, there's actually a couple of them that you'll see on here that we're going to address during tonight's meeting. So you'll see that it's noted in here as well. So just want to give you guys a heads up here. So the first one was 4.1, which is to co-develop and map where trees will be planted to identify priority areas to ensure urban greening provides maximum value, at least in public spaces. And right now, the district will work with community members to identify priority areas for urban greening once the RFP period closes and responses are received. So the RFP closes, I believe, July 28th, so at the end of the month. The next action item that is still pending is develop a highly visual graphic representation of emissions mitigation plans, emissions reductions, and primary sources of pollution. The district will share during tonight's meeting some graphics to illustrate emission reductions achieved from the SERP measures and from sources of pollution. The next one, also by today's meeting, if AD does not hear any feedback from local school districts that they need funding for air filtrations, AD will assume they don't need funding and assess with the committee on how to move forward with the funding. And so this is also one of the topics that we'll be discussing tonight. The next item is to develop a targeted outreach plan for growers to have them potentially support the implementation of vegetative and / green barriers. This is something we're still thinking about and researching, so we'll touch base with the CSC once we have something. The next item is during the July CSC meeting, the committee will discuss where to move incentive funding based on prioritization and allocation of certain measures. A more in-depth discussion of shifting funds among measures will be part of tonight's meeting. The next item is CSC members will review draft community meeting agreements and bring recommendations for a vote at the next meeting. And that is also on our agenda, which is our group of agreements. This is also an item that was a holdover from last meeting. The next item is the AD to develop a comprehensive overview of air monitoring locations, results, and general updates to present at future CSC meetings. The district is planning to do this as a discussion at our next meeting in August. So keep that in mind for August. The next item is the Cal EPA to join future meetings to discuss oil and gas enforcement. When giving a presentation, they will send materials ahead of time in English and Spanish. Cal EPA will be on hold on a list of potential discussion topics so that CSC can decide if and when to hear an update at a future meeting. So that is pretty much it from the last meeting. I do want to scroll down to some of the items that we did complete, that's in the completed column from that meeting as well. That item is to develop an inclusive process for collecting feedback on urban greening incentive measures. The district is always open to feedback at any time and will continue to work with the committee members as the urban greening measures progresses. The next item is during the July CSC meeting, the committee will discuss where to move incentive funding based on prioritization and allocation of certain measures. A more in-depth discussion will again be discussed during tonight's meeting. And then CSC members will review draft committee meeting agreements. Oh, I think I just moved that one down. To develop comprehensive. Yep, I think these are just other ones that we moved, already reviewed. So did anyone have any questions? If they do, please go ahead and raise your hands and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Song. And also if there are any sort of anything that you didn't see there that should be there, please, this is the time to raise your hands and sort of provide any recommendations for that.
Thank you. If there's no questions, then I think we're done.
I was intentionally leaving the long pause. I've taught before too, so it's always interesting that when you leave a longer pause, you know, someone will come forth. So, any thoughts on that? No. Okay. See, we do have something in the chat. Let me just make sure it's not a question. Perfect. Thank you so much, Song. Again, those are sort of in real time. So today during our meeting, we will also sort of anything that comes forth, we'll go ahead and add that to the action item tracker. Okay, so thank you for that. So I'm going to go ahead and move us now to the group agreements. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and provide a little bit of context, sort of reminder in terms of where we went, where we at, and where we want to sort of go with those community agreements. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Okay, perfect. So this slide that I'm sharing is sort of the group agreements that were sort of placed forth, right? And I'm sharing this because we were sort of, today I wanted to propose sort of a new set of agreements that we developed that are more kind of tied to inequity lens, right? But we don't want to finalize them yet and want to kind of get your input, right? So this first slide that I'm sharing is the set of community agreements that we initially had, right? But there's been discussion since April of sort of developing a set of agreements that are more tied to the particular needs of this community, right? And that it directly gauges to the needs, right? In terms of your perspective, the language, right? Sort of looking at those aspects. So this is sort of the old list here. And I'm going to sort of go to the proposed list. And what I want to do today is, and I can go back and forth, right? But I'm going to share and kind of zoom in more on these. And we have 10 minutes today. So what I wanted to kind of get a sense of, we can use our virtual hand raise, is that whether we want to finalize this, right? Or if there's a greater consensus of sort of editing and adding to this based on sort of where you all are at, we can definitely kind of intentionally add that for the next meeting, where we can kind of do something interactive, right? To add anything that might be missing or edit any of these, right? But the ones that we sort of developed in terms of our team coming together and creating a set of lists that sort of specifically the language is more tied to sort of an equity lens is what you have here, right? The first one being listening to understand, right? In terms of sort of using I statements. And I'll be right with you, Annabelle. Acknowledging power dynamics, right? Sort of how taking up space, right? And being aware of that and stepping back when taking too much space, right? So similar to the third one, making space, taking space. There are no quick fixes, right? That this is sort of a process, a fluid process in motion. The virtual value all experiences and sort of allow those to all kind of come to the table, right? And compassion and mindfulness, sort of thinking of that as a lens and approach. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm really excited to see that there is a hand raise. Annabelle, ¿tiene una pregunta?
Sí, ¿estos van a estar incluidos a los que ya están puestos?
No, muy buena pregunta. No van a reemplazar los otros, así que va a ser como un reemplace de los que existían antes.
¿Por qué?
Esto, el propósito, muy buena pregunta. El propósito es para que los involucremos a ustedes a crear esta lista, right? So como que es what's important for you, what's important for another member, right? So it's a new list that takes a more kind of collective approach, right? Más colectivo, que estamos queriendo ser inclusivos de su perspectiva, de que es importante para
¿Porque
ustedes.
no estaban claros los otros o no entendíamos los otros?
Muy buena pregunta. Yo no estaba aquí en abril, so I'm going to pass this on to one of my other colleagues if they can kind of fill in anything that I maybe missed in terms of why we are creating a new set of community agreements.
Yeah, so thank you, Doctora Cardona, and thank you, Annabelle, for the question. So in April, when we asked if you all would like to modify the agreements, what we heard was yes. And so we'd like to start the process by providing you with group agreements that, in our opinion, are more inclusive. And today's conversation is about...
Pues sí, pero ¿quién? ¿Quién aceptó el cambio? Es lo que quiero saber.
Yeah, they're not changed officially.
Amy, can I jump in?
Yeah, you would have to vote on the change. So today is starting that process, and we would like to get your feedback. If you all don't want to change any of them, if you're satisfied with the old ones, we could keep the old ones as well. But those old agreements, as you know, Annabelle, do not include our team. So you had those agreements with the previous facilitators. And so our facilitation approach is to have group agreements that are more inclusive and equitable, hence the proposed change.
Ok, con permiso, con permiso. Dice usted que ustedes no estaban incluidos, entonces, ¿quién ha hecho las decisiones? Porque las decisiones se han hecho sin nosotros.
No,
ustedes las han hecho.
No, right now there is no decision being made. Right now it's a proposal to see if you would like to change the group agreement. And this is the proposed set of agreements to get us started on the conversation. And we would like to get your feedback. However, if you think the other ones are better, the ones that your facilitation team were not a part of, we're happy to adopt those previous ones. And I see two Jessica hands. Go ahead, Jessica.
I was just about to say, and maybe Jessica Silva can do a better job of this than I can. Jessica, can you take us through a quick little history about sort of, these are just slides. Oh, sorry, I think I clicked over someone. Sorry. I was just going to say, these are just the slides that start us off every meeting. And to Amy or Dr. Ramos's point, the slides, they weren't ever like a discussion point with the committee. It was just slides that our old facilitation team used to share before every meeting. And we shared it with this facilitation team to start off every meeting. And then maybe I'll pass it off to Jessica to where this facilitation team took over and wanted to kind of just freshen up and I think make more equitable. So go ahead, Jess.
I thank you. I want to, first of all, thank the CSC members who are raising the concern. This was a discussion, and Michelle, I do see your hand up, and I think you were part of this conversation. This was a discussion that was actually started during an agenda setting meeting, and members during the agenda setting meeting expressed that they would like group agreements that reflected the values of the CSC a little bit more. So what Laura and Amy and I did was create these new agreements to show to the CSC, and then the CSC can provide input. Our approach was to take a more equitable, a more anti-racist lens, and obviously inclusive, because we want everybody to own these, not just the CSC, right? We want presenters to take some of these also. So for example, power and privilege show up in many ways. This is not only for the CSC, it's also for presenters, members of the public who speak up. And we just want the conversation here to be a lot more inclusive and equitable. And that's where it came from. We are very happy that you are all speaking up, but that's kind of where this came from.
Yeah, thank you for that background, Jessica. I do have another hand up. Michelle, go ahead.
Yes, I remember the agenda setting meeting. We had some very passionate discussions, and they got a tad a little more passionate. And so I think as a group, we said we should review these and make sure that everybody remembers them. I didn't really think about you guys doing a whole new group agreement. I didn't probably think that far down the line. I think it was more that we wanted to make sure that we remembered that we needed to respect everybody when we started, and however that comes across. Can we go back and look at the first slide? You know, I'm a little more old school, that some of this stuff is, you know.
Yeah, so this is the original list here, yeah.
Yeah, these are a little more, you know, old school, straightforward, not so probably exclusive like you would say. I think that, you know, if we could get I don't really want to spend a whole bunch of time on them, because we just need to be reminded to be respectful of each other and everybody's time. And however we can make that happen, that's great. And whether they are read or looked at every meeting, that's great. But I think the point is we just have to respect each other, and however that you guys want to put those words together, you know, we should move that forward, not spend a lot of time on it, because, you know, we have other things that are more important to talk about.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I just want to honor Annabelle. You do have your hand up again. I'm going to give you some space to share any other thoughts, but I think what I wanted to say is that it's ultimately your choice, right? What you all think is most important in terms of the needs of the chapter community. That second slide, we want to throw that out the window. That's fine. I think it ultimately is, the purpose is how do we engage you in the process of adding anything or editing anything in this list that has lived for a while, that is cognizant of what your needs are in terms of shifting the language, right? So I think that's the purpose, right? That is ultimately sort of what you all want and what would be more helpful to produce spaces where everyone's being heard and everyone's needs are being heard. Annabelle?
Soy Gustavo Aguirre. Quería hacer
Hola,
el comentario.
Gustavo.
Muchas de las preguntas que estamos aquí en el grupo es ¿qué se está tratando de arreglar? ¿Qué no estaba funcionando con los acuerdos pasados? Esa es una que no nomás aquí las señoras, pero yo también. ¿Qué estamos tratando de arreglar? Es una. Déjeme terminar. La otra es si se van a, porque mi entendido es si iban a agregarlas, o sea, cuando recién agarramos estas es los comentarios aquí, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, ¿se nos quiere callar o qué es el problema? Yo entiendo de que tiene que ser yo entiendo lo que tiene que ser con respeto. Sí, yo también busco respeto y espero respeto, ¿verdad? Yo creo que todos lo hacemos, eso estamos de acuerdo en eso. Ahora, si se van a reemplazar las que estaban por estas nuevas, yo creo que lo que estamos platicando aquí, creo que todas están bien, con la excepción de la número 4, donde dice no hay arreglos rápidos. ¿Qué tiene de equitativo eso de no hay acuerdos rápidos? Eso no lo entiendo yo, no lo entendemos aquí. ¿Por qué es equitativo el que no hay acuerdos rápidos?
No, muy buen punto. Pienso que, let me speak in English, but it's because so for the translation. Part of the point of adding that kind of language is that that things might take more time, right? In terms of, even for example, the development of these community agreements, right? That there was a need voiced in April, right? And sort of the response to that need was to potentially edit them, right? And as we see, we're now in July, and we're just sort of talking about the community agreements, right? That sometimes change can happen at different rhythms, right? So that's sort of the point or the language for that one. But again, if it's not something that resonates with the community, we can definitely remove that. Again, there were just proposed lists in terms of needing to add anything to this original list or changing any of the wording, right? That might not sit well for some in the community. So again, it's something proposed that's not.
Sí, creo que estuve yo en la plática, ¿verdad? Donde se sugirió de que hubiera respeto. Eso obviamente todos lo queremos. Y una de las cosas que es difícil para mí personalmente entender es, se iba a hablar en la siguiente junta de pesticidas y se sugirió que se hiciera con respeto. Yo creo que se ha hecho con respeto. Pero se me hace que se está tomando esto más allá de lo que es el respeto. Se están queriendo cambiar todas juntas, las que ya se tenían. Y si hay que cambiarse, sí, pero ¿qué es lo que no estaba funcionando que se quiere corregir? Porque lo que no está funcionando es lo que se tiene que corregir. Si estaba funcionando lo demás, ¿por qué tenemos que cambiarlo?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Gustavo. Sorry, Hem, I just want to interject for 1 second and say it's not that it wasn't working. To be clear, as your facilitators, we're here to help, I don't want to say enforce, but really create an environment where we're following all these agreements. And because there was an opportunity to edit some of the wording, we made some of those slight edits so that when we are helping enforce some of these things, we can, in that case, enforce those agreements. So I'll give you an example. To be civil and respectful, that one, I personally have a problem with that, because to say someone be civil, it's the assumption that people aren't being civil. We don't want to assume that people aren't being civil. Instead, Hema, if you can go to the next slide, it really is getting at the same thing, but it's a slight word change that in our understanding as equitable facilitators, it really means the same thing, but instead of telling people to be civil, which again, we're not assuming that they're not, we're saying let's acknowledge the power dynamics, because when there are power dynamics in the room, they show up very differently. Department of Pesticide Regulation speaks differently than we speak. So how do we acknowledge everyone's power and have a good conversation? So I think where we're at right now is, if your team, if the CSC would like to keep the language that you have in your group agreement, we can have a consensus on that and abandon this word change. But know that as your facilitators, we would prefer to have language that's more inclusive, and we can let that go though. That's completely okay. So the ask for today is for folks to look at these so that next time when we come back, you can just say yes or no, change, send us any edits, but we don't want to take away time from your meeting. Really, it's as your facilitators, we're trying to manage the conversation and ensure that we're following what you want us to do. And what we heard is that we've articulated here in this revised version.
Yeah. Sí, nada más mi último comentario de este punto, aquí todo el grupo de los que estamos, creo que Anabel las puso ahí, todas las personas que estamos, dicen que estamos de acuerdo en todas, menos la que dice no hay arreglos rápidos, que esa no debería estar incluida ahí porque no miramos que tiene sentido. Todas las demás tienen sentido, esa no. Gracias.
Thank you. Any other comments from any CSC members before we move on to the next item?
Solamente yo quería hacer un comentario. Antes de comenzar la junta, se ponen a leer todos estos acuerdos y las juntas se lleva por lo bajito como 20, 25 minutos de puros acuerdos, en lugar de aprovecharlo en algo que es más productivo. Yo dijera que si lo sintetizan, ya somos adultos, ya entendemos que no nos lo lean cada junta porque eso es robar tiempo. Y el tiempo se está yendo, el tiempo se está pasando. Entonces, todos esos acuerdos los tenemos escritos, los mandan en nuestros papeles. A mí me gustaría que se ahorrara ese tiempo para otra cosa. Sí se puede, ¿ok? Respetuosamente sí se puede. Gracias.
Gracias, Anabel. Ese es muy buen punto y eso es como parte de lo que estamos tratando de entender que es más importante, or what's more useful for all you. So maybe we can put that, make sure we highlight that on the notes in terms of shifting, right, in terms of where we focus our energy. Gracias, Anabel. Okay, so to keep everyone on time, I'm going to go ahead and move to our next item, the SERP incentives measures funding follow-up, which I'm going to sort of pass on to Jessica. As we're going through these, Jessica, I think the main question that I have is, would you prefer if there's questions between each one or at the very end?
Thank you. Great question. We can certainly take questions along the way. I might note at a specific time, if we haven't gotten to the discussion slides yet, I might pause us if the questions are still happening so we can get to those. But I'm happy to answer questions along the way. It's actually, all of you hopefully have seen the presentation. It's relatively short in terms of the slides, but there's a lot on there. And then I'll just start by iterating what I said at the top, because I know a few more folks have joined since. So one more time, my name is Jessica Olson. I'm the Director of Community Strategies and Resources. And today's presentation has a lot of those action item follow-ups that Zong mentioned at the top of the meeting. We're going to briefly review some of the graphics that give a high-level picture of where we're currently at, not only with spending the money, but also getting the needed emissions reductions. And then we have 3 decisions that we're hoping to make tonight by consensus. But of course, like I mentioned earlier, if for some reason we need to step back or we have different options because you all have different ideas or something else that we want to get feedback on, we're okay with that. But we heard loud and clear last meeting that we felt like we were at least ready to make a couple of decisions on moving funding from some measures to the next. And then I'll finally, before I even jump into it, there were a couple of things, but because there's a lot on the agenda, that we are really looking forward to move to discussing at the next agenda. So I'll just tell you right now, we are hoping that at the next agenda meeting, we talk about some of the road paving and bike path stuff. Today, we're focusing on air filtration and vegetative barriers and a couple of just general updates about other incentives measures. So just sort of setting expectations before we jump in. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Please, as everyone knows, Hema and others, help me as I share my screen. It's hard for me to see raised hands and chat comments. So I will dive right in. The first few slides I'm going to share are bilingual because they are up to date, up to the minute graphics of funding and emissions reductions that are spent. From now on, if you guys like these graphics, these will be the graphics we will send out to you for every meeting. So you will have them in your next packet. Once I finish these, the rest of the slideshow will be in English. All of the folks that need or prefer it in Spanish hopefully got their packets ahead of time. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. This on the left-hand side is the English version of the same graphic I'm showing here on the right. This is something we shared last year in our annual report, and it is something that we will update pretty regularly. And it's 3 funding bars, and then I'll explain the bottom 2, but really briefly, this is how much money we have spent to date. That's the green number here. The blue number is how much funding we can spend based on projects being approved to spend by CARB or by the Air District. And so anything that's in orange is stuff that we've submitted to CARB, you know, those project plans we often talk about, but have yet to spend, yet to get approval. So we're hoping to get this in the blue. And then of course, the goal is to spend everything. And then this total number represents the full amount. So we've always shared this number. This is the 38 million. I do see a hand already. I'll just really briefly explain the other 2 pieces and then I'll take the hand. These are with the funding we've spent. These are the emissions reductions that we've paid for with that money, meaning we've spent $9.5 million to get 294 tons of particulate matter reductions or PM 2.5 reductions. And that same amount of funding has also gotten us 547. So you can see, and we'll show on the next slide, that even though we haven't spent about half the funding, we've gotten more than half of the reductions because what we've spent so far, and you'll see it in a couple of other slides, has really been spent on those heavy duty type of measure of equipment, the measures in your SERP that get a lot of reductions. So I will pause, I will take a hand and a question, and then go on to our next slide.
Yeah, Jessica, we also have a quick question for clarification before we go to Annabeth. Is the gray is what's not allocated?
Great question. So,
the gray?
Yes, so gray is just sort of their, and yeah, we don't have it called out here, but it says essentially gray. Total, it adds up to 38 million. The gray is, yes, we haven't even submitted to get approval for funding because it's not a project plan yet. Pretty much every meeting, today is actually the exception. We've gone over a little bit of the status, and one of our tables, and I'm happy to link in a previous presentation, are measures where project plans haven't yet been submitted. We still are working on feedback with you. We're working together with our partners. And so that's exactly what that gray represents.
Annabel, go ahead.
Sí, con respecto a eso, quiero preguntar, ¿por qué a nosotros nunca se nos mandan esos folletos? ¿Por qué nosotros nunca sabemos a cuánto les dan a cada quien? Nos mandan estos papeles grandes, pero en realidad nosotros no sabemos nada de esos fondos. El comité, estoy hablando por el comité, nunca nos mandan eso. Aquí están todos los papeles, pero eso no lo mandaron a nosotros.
This is a brand new graphic that we just made today, but all of this information is the information we send every month in the tracker. It's just displayed differently here. And we're hoping to get feedback today. If we like this, we will send this graphic every time with that tracker. That tracker, that really big piece of paper, has even more details. It says how much has been spent for every single measure and how much reductions for every single measure, and a couple of other details in the status column. So that's what that big tracker, that's the big piece of paper that comes in the mail every time.
Thank you, Jessica. And just to clarify, to make sure we understand everything correctly, your answer to Annabeth's question is that the reason it hasn't been sent out is because this was recently created, right? And we're asking for some input right now, correct?
Yes, we just created this today. We're looking for input. Okay. If we like it, and sorry, I didn't clarify that earlier. If we like it, we will add this, and this will be how we report, including the tracker we send you every month. So this is just a quick visual of the tracker. The next slide and the slide after are also things we will include. This is all still, though, to just continue, all of the funding and the emissions reductions are reported in that tracker every month.
And we have another question. Michelle, go ahead.
Jessica, can we see the next 2 slides?
Yes.
Just so that, you know, sometimes that clarifies this. This is very general, which is great, but then, you know, you start to look, what does that really mean?
Yes.
But your next two slides may say that.
Yes, they certainly do. That's a great point. And yes, I'm happy to do so. So the next two slides definitely are different takes. The next one is general, but a different take. And the following one will be very detailed. It is measure by measure. So this slide is an answer to a question we got last meeting. And again, this is going to be, this is a SERP breakdown. So we can provide this at, with everyone in our next packet, and it will not change. This is how much is actually in the SERP right now. Granted, if we move funding around, it will change. So we're happy to update this every time it changes. But this is a breakdown because we got the question last meeting. Why are we spending so much, or what does spending kind of money on residential versus kind of the local community-based measures versus the ag and business measures get us in terms of emissions reductions? So we thought it was important to share that although about half of the funding is going to the measures that are geared towards ag and business measures, it's really benefiting the community the most because we are getting far more, 88%, so way more for our money for these types of measures. And I'll explain what these measures are in our next slide, but these are the measures that are the heavy duty measures and some of those other dust type measures. But you can see there is a significant chunk of funding for residential and local. So these are going to be things like urban greening and bike paths and road paving. All of these still contribute to a good amount of emissions reductions. And all of this, 100% of these, so all 1,981 benefit the community in the sense that we are reducing or aiming to reduce this much in the community. And so we're happy every time, and today will be that part of that time. Anytime we shift funding, which today we're looking to shift funding from some of these to other categories, as you'll see in later slides, we'll update this and we'll also send this out to you. And then to Michelle's point, and this is going to be a lot in one, it's supposed to be a quick look because, as I mentioned earlier, we just want to make sure that this makes sense. We will make it a little more reader friendly in the sense that it will be, we'll send a Spanish and an English version with our packets if we like this. It's essentially the previous slide broken down by measure. And so I'll just walk you through it. For one example, this we'll go here to the low dust harvesters. We are aiming to reduce, or we were rather aiming to reduce about 180 tons. And that's this achieved reduction. So we have already achieved this number of reductions, meaning we've purchased or, you know, paid, incentivized rather, the purchase of those low dust harvesters. Because we didn't spend any extra money, we purchased, we've paid for, I think we've done 21. This is all in the tracker, by the way. We've done 21. We said we were going to do 25. Based on the projects that came in, we actually are going to get more reductions than we even thought we were going to get in the beginning. Because, for example, in this case, the harvesters are going to be used at more farms. So meaning more farms are going to benefit from the low dust or the harvesters that don't produce as much dust. So we're actually going to get more reductions than we expected. Another example is ag equipment replacement and tractors. We were aiming to get around a little over 400. We still have some to go, and that's this light blue bar here. And so you can see that for every example, there's obviously some of them are more than others, but they're still there and they're still important. But really the goal is to get all of these filled out in blue. And if we get green, that's great. That doesn't mean we spent any more money. It just means that the projects got more reductions than we even thought we were going to get in the beginning, which is really great. And so this is just that example. If folks generally like having all of this in a more visual format, we will then create this, we'll post it on the website every month, and we will also send it out every month in those packets. So you'll have the details, and then you also have the visual look. I'll stop, well, maybe I'll keep sharing my slide as I do see a hand from Michelle.
Michelle, go ahead. You have a question?
Yes. The first two, the second one, that was really interesting. I didn't expect to see how that portrayed. That's what, that you're basically residential and local government is the same as ag business or ag and business. And look what the reduction is. That was very interesting and interesting to see it that way. The third slide, it's maybe if you separate English and Spanish out, it may be easier. It's very cumbersome. I like start through the first one, then I go, oh yeah, this next page, next slide.
For sure. And you know what? We're happy to take that. And maybe what we'll do is we'll send out as we take some feedback today, we'll send out obviously a separate English one and Spanish one. So they look, you can see them a little more legibly. And maybe we'll play around with making things a little bit bigger and bolder and easier to read. And then continue to get feedback. We can keep editing these as much as possible. The idea being, we think there needs to be, and Gustavo Aguirre Jr. made this point a couple of times, there needs to be a quick way for people to see the progress. And so we're hoping that maybe something like this if you wanted to share with your neighbors or you wanted to share with us, hey, district, we want to see more progress. Here's the visual you're sharing with us. Where is the blue bar? It helps us all quickly look and see where we're at. And so we're hoping, I think, Michelle, you've made some great points. If there's any other thoughts, we're happy to take them now or let you guys, think about it and get back to us. Again, we'll send out a hard copy before the next meeting and get further feedback.
Thank you so much. I actually had I had a clarification in case anyone else is having the same thought, Jessica, which was you mentioned earlier that the money could be shifted around. Is that something you're wanting to get input from today, or how can community members sort of reach out or provide that feedback in terms of shifting money around?
That is,
and then we'll go to Gustavo.
Yes, that is exactly what today's meeting is. The rest of the slides are exact, the exact discussion we had last month in decision format, meaning based on the feedback about moving funding, we've created sort of 3 decision points that we're hoping to get feedback on tonight. As we move forward, we can continue, and we'd love to continue to hear that feedback on shifting funding. And we hope the process will be the same, meaning we'll hear feedback, we'll have a discussion, we'll make some options, and then we'll bring the options to the CSC.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Gustavo, go ahead.
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? Gustavo with CCJN. Can you go back 2 slides? Thank you. Just for my own kind of ability to kind of wrap my head around this. First of all, thank you for putting this visual together. It really represents like the hard work that we've been putting in all together, right? And from that, nearly 800 tons of emissions have been, whether it's PM 2.5 or NOx, have been reduced. From this image, the 15 million, is that what is potentially still available to invest for the remainder of AB617? Okay.
There's more than that. So actually,
it's around 25, right?
Yeah, it's actually, it's around 20, around 25, yes. So 15 means it's available right this moment, meaning CARB and the district have approved plans for them.
Okay.
So that's a good clarification. And we can continue to edit this slide so that it's a little more obvious. And maybe even talk a little bit about this gray area too from the comment that Steve made earlier.
Right on. And can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
And then, so the first bar is the percentage. What is that? That's the committed funding, right? So the 51%, 28.
Exactly. So it's percentage of overall. So this, now we're not even talking about how much has been spent. This is just what the SERP represents.
Okay.
So the funding that we commit to in the SERP, 21% are for residential measures, and it's not clear here. So again, when maybe this is all great feedback for making things clearer and more legible. The residential measures are here in this blue. So that's car share, dial-a-ride, lawn and garden equipment, residential, replacement of vehicles, tune in, tune up, wood burning devices. So those are all included in here. Local government measures is the next one, which includes things like urban greening and road paving and bikes, things that are for the government. And then pretty much everything else is in the ag and business.
I feel like we're missing a couple of segments like industrial practices, or am I wrong?
So these are all for the CERP measures that receive funding. And so business is, we kind of included everything in business, but we're happy to rename this. This is everything else. So this is the one that would include char broilers, trucks, rail cars, ag pumps, trucks, TRUs, low dust harvesters, alternatives to ag burning, and tractors.
Right on. Okay. Going back to the previous slide, so the committed funding essentially means like of the total pot, this is what we've committed so far, like committed meaning the air district.
Yeah, again, this is great feedback for clarification. That is the CERP funding. So the commitment from the district to fund in the CERP.
Okay. And then from that, the second bar is the target emissions reduction. That's also like
estimate,
a projection, right? Of if we were to invest 8 million in residential, 10 million in local government, and 19 million in ag, theoretically, this is the emissions reduction that we would have at the end of this project.
If we were, yes, based on the way that the CERP is as it went into this, meaning obviously we're deciding tonight on moving some things around so that will shift, but yes, those are the estimates based on when we originally put the CERP together.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, just
wanted to understand it a little bit more. Great questions, because I think you're already getting us to think about better clarifying language, and we'll amend some of these based on the notes and send out we'll send out hard copies within a few weeks with some clearer language, and then continue to modify as needed.
Yeah, thank you for great questions, Gustavo, and particularly one note on the tracker to sort of shift and change some of that language that you mentioned. And also, I think it's important for everyone to hear that these are sort of, we use the word theoretical, right? They're sort of estimates, right? So I think that was good clarification. Annabelle, do you have your hand raised?
Sí, tengo una pregunta. ¿Qué encierra residencial? Porque ahí dice residencial, ¿verdad? 8 millones 40 mil. ¿En qué encierra residencial? Para mí no entiendo.
Great question. So the residential measures, and I had it on this slide, and I'm realizing right now there's something weird here. So I'm going to make sure that this is a little clearer. The residential measures are, urban greening is not a residential. The residential measures, let's go back to this, are the car share program, the Dial-A-Ride program, the lawn and garden equipment program, the replacement of passenger vehicles, which is the majority of that funding, the tune-in tune-up program, and the replacement of wood burning devices. So the majority of that comes from the replacement of passenger vehicles program.
Annabelle, did that answer your question?
¿Se va a gastar? ¿Ya se gastó? ¿Esa es una cantidad que está seleccionada para los residenciales?
Yes, that is the amount that is already selected for residential. So it's not how much we've spent so far, it's total. And what we've spent so far is pretty much summarized in the fact that we've really only spent it on lawn and garden equipment. We have not done the residential passenger vehicles, which we need to do. We are working on Dial-A-Ride, and you folks have taken advantage of the fireplace replacement, but we're going to talk today about adding more to that. And then also today, we're going to talk about adding a residential air filtration measure. And so that will be added to that because that was one of your requests. And we have a discussion today on moving funding from one of the measures to a residential measure.
Thank you for clarifying that. Annabelle, yes, it's proposed, and then we're asking for feedback of shifting, moving the money. Do you have any follow-up to that, Annabelle?
Ah, sí. ¿A cuántos está el dinero de los rancheros? Nunca se nos dijo a qué rancheros se les dio el dinero, a qué tipo de ranchos, porque aquí estamos rodeados de sembradío y se supone que se les dio para tractores. A ellos ya se les dio ese dinero para las almendras y todo eso, y tractores y pompas de agua. Pero ¿a cuál rancheros? ¿Cuáles son sus nombres de los rancheros? Sí nos gustaría saber, para ver a quién se les está dando y cuánto se les está dando a cada ranchero. Porque aquí la mayor parte que está cultivado es del Wonderful. Él tiene casi todo lo que es la ciudad aquí de Shafter, lo rodeado. Entonces, ¿cuáles son los nombres de esos rancheros que se les ha dado? Si se puede, si no es indiscreción, para saber también. Porque mire, nos han dado máquinas de cortar zacate nomás. Y nomás fueron como 200. ¿Y cuántos somos aquí de comunidad? ¿Cuántos residentes somos aquí en la ciudad de Shafter? Entonces, tiene que haber un balance, porque si queremos quitar contaminación, tiene que ser de los dos lados, comunidad y los rancheros. Entonces, no se puede dar más a uno y menos a otro, yo entiendo, porque cuando nosotros anduvimos en estas juntas, nunca se presentó un ranchero, nunca se presentó el petróleo, nunca se presentó ferrocarril. Nosotros nos íbamos de madrugada, sin desayunar, dejábamos nuestro trabajo, dejábamos nuestra casa y no regresábamos hasta la 1 de la mañana. Entonces, ahora que ya se dio ese dinero, queremos saber a quién se le dio y cuánto se le dio. Porque si se están valiendo de nuestro sacrificio para ellos complementar su negocio, entonces, pues creo que es justo, ¿verdad? Sería justo que nosotros se nos notificara los nombres de los rancheros y la cantidad que se les ha dado. Por favor, si podrían. Que creo que sí.
Tienen que poder. Thank you, Annabelle. That's a great question. I will work with our incentives team on getting whatever we're allowed to share. From my understanding, I do think we do start to have to report kind of generally, you know, who receives incentives from this program. And so I'll work with you and we'll follow up with you, Annabelle, just in case, if for some reason I hear differently, I'll give you a call or have the team give you a call and let you know. But otherwise, that's a commitment. I'll have Harder and Company write that down as a commitment to make sure that we, if we're allowed to, that we're able to do that. To a couple of other points, we are hoping today, one of the things that we are hoping to do pretty soon is release the funding, you know, within the next, I say soon, but you know, things take time, within the next few months, start to open and develop the program for passenger vehicle replacement. That is $6 million for residents in Shafter. So $6 million for passenger vehicle replacement, as well as continued, and we hope today to add funding to the residential fireplace so that folks don't have to pay out of pocket. So we're hoping to add some more. The other thing we're hoping to do today is add funding for residential air filtration. So if we can do all of those things, then we're really moving a lot of funding to and getting funding out there for residents. I hear you that there's definitely still more going to the ag community and the business community. We were hoping that this slide really illustrates the need for that different balance, in that about half goes to the community and the residents and half goes to businesses. But you can see that really with the emissions reductions being the main aim of the program, we're hoping that either way benefits are seen in the community, because the community will all benefit from the reductions. But we hear you. We're hoping to make some decisions to move more funding to the residential side today. And like I said, just in response to all of the comments, we're going to take all of this feedback and really make sure that these sets of graphics are really useful for folks, and that you all get them in your packets and that they make sense and that they're easy to see. And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. And I will make sure my team notes that in terms of providing a clear answer to another's question about the rancheros. So we can please note that to follow up on that. Any other questions before we have Jessica continue?
Sí, aquí en el papel que usted nos mandó, aún con todos estos años que hemos estado, aún no se tiene una cantidad específica para la filtración del aire, para lo residencial. Tampoco hay una cantidad específica para barrera vegetativa. Yo sé que se está trabajando en eso. ¿Cuál es la razón de que nos dejan al último? Porque no tenemos miedo de que no se vayan a quedar sin fondos y después no nos den nada a nosotros, ¿sí me entienden?
Sorry, and maybe I hope we're looking at the right presentation. The presentation today gives two specific numbers, one for air filtration for residents. The feedback we got is folks wanted to move it from the school air filtration, and that's, I'm showing this slide right now, it's a little bit ahead. If we got feedback from the schools that they weren't interested, so that would be exactly 250, so that's specific. And then I'll come back to my earlier slides, but then just to clarify, we also have an outline for $1 million for vegetative barriers if that's what folks are interested in. So we added both of those here if that's what people want, and we'll get to those and ask you all officially if that's what you want. So we do have those specific numbers. I'm sorry if that's not clear, but hopefully when I present them, it's clear.
Hi, this is Steve Esselman with the City of Baker or City of Shafter. It sounds like we're going to get to that. The funding for residential is in place and we're actually going to enrich it, correct?
Funding for residential is not in place. And so that is the feedback we've heard, is that folks want it. It is a new measure. Okay. And so we are hoping, and that's what this slide shares, is that yes, move to a new measure. And we heard for residential and then including daycare and preschool, which we've heard several times. And so to your point, Steve, yes, that is a discussion we'll have right actually the second, and maybe I can just segue into it.
Yeah, why don't we do that? I mean, because I mean, let's see what we can come up with before we start getting upset.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. So if that's okay, Annabelle, I don't mind starting to explain, and then if there's questions, I can get to them. But just an update, and this can be quick, and I'm happy if folks are like, yep, we've been saying it for months. We're happy to just take consensus and move on. But we wanted to just update you. We heard feedback. It was in the action items that we would work for 1 more month to get feedback from Shafter area schools. None of the schools, a few discussed with us a couple different times, read the options, realized it wasn't something that they needed any longer, or were just not interested in participating. And so the feedback we heard was to let you all know that. Many of them have already upgraded their systems. I don't have the details to provide to you. I'm happy to continue to, if folks want to continue that discussion, but the direct feedback I heard from you all was give them a month after all of that feedback if they're not interested, especially since many of them have already upgraded and provided better filtration. The feedback from you all was to consider moving it. And so our ask of you today is, should we move the funding to a new measure? And that measure, and we will work with all of you to decide, like we will give some feedback on the exact details, but we heard residential, daycare, and preschools, because those previously were not eligible. And so this would be 250,000. This is you. I'm sorry, I'm still, okay. In the presentation we sent, this would be yes to move that whole funding to a brand new measure that would give residents filters. It would give daycare and preschools access to air filtration and air purification. We've done a little bit of legwork, and because we just actually launched a program, and I'm going to share here right on my screen right now, where 250,000, let's say for example, and it's going to be silly simple math, but math nonetheless, about 250 dollars will get you a nice air purifier to put in the home. And that was the thought. And so if that case, that would be about 1,000 purifiers. It's possible that's not enough, but at the very least, as a starting point, do we want to move the funding from this measure into a new measure? Or an answer no just means we'll continue to work with schools if needed, although we didn't see any interest or feedback from the schools interested in keeping it here. Obviously, there could be other options to move it elsewhere, so we're happy to hear that too. I do think there are some comments, and then otherwise I might look to the facilitators to facilitate a consensus on yes or no.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So I think now if there's any sort of specifically any objections, or if you you can put it on the chat, indicate yes or no, or you can raise your hand and I'll get to you in a second. Annabelle, go ahead. Then we'll go to Dora. Annabelle, go ahead. You're muted. Maybe we'll go to Dora while Annabelle fixes the technical issue. Go ahead, Dora.
Okay, Jessica, can you share the images I sent in, please?
Yes, is this related to the air filtration and school?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
I'm happy to share right now.
I can too, Jessica, if you want.
I think I've got it since I already up. I'm just going to share the email that you sent Zong. And I might slowly scroll through them, Dora, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fully in favor of shifting some of the funding. This is where I live, and this is during the almond harvesting season, which will be starting up pretty soon. We don't only need air purifiers, we need somehow to filter out a lot of the pesticide drift and the dust that comes into our homes by way of high quality filters for the units, for the outside vents, for the inside vents. I mean, we have a dire need out here, not only us, but all the communities where the orchards run adjacent to the communities. That's all of the outside of Shafter. And in this presentation also, I would like to request that a lot of the funds be allocated for vegetative barriers, not that they will mitigate all of this, but it would really help us a lot. And I'm speaking in terms of like oleanders. They have oleanders along Burbank, and that has helped a lot. And they have them along Shafter Avenue and some of the fields. But we need something because we go through this all those months of the year and through the pesticide drift too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora.
Thank
Definitely
you, Dora, for
powerful.
sharing those images. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, those powerful images. I'm going to go ahead and order. Annabelle, go ahead. You have the mic. And then we'll go to Gustavo.
Sí, esto que puso Dora está magnífico, magnífico, porque es lo que nosotros les hemos dicho con palabras, pero ahora ella se los puso para que vean que no es mentira, es verdad lo que está pasando aquí. Ahora, mi pregunta es, no manden ese dinero de las escuelas, por favor, de los filtros, si no se apuntaron, si no calificaron, si no están entusiasmados, porque también yo sé que el Estado también les da a ellos otra cantidad de dinero, entonces quizás a ellos no les conviene agarrar dinero de dos partes. Entonces, esos fondos nosotros quisiéramos para que se haga rápido eso de las barras, porque ya va a empezar otra vez esta cosecha. Entonces, esto es continuo, cada año es lo mismo. Y entre más pronto se haga, será mejor. Porque el ranchero, él hace su trabajo y no le importa la comunidad. A él no le importa si vas caminando, si vas en carro, si vives enseguida o si vives a una milla, media milla. Ellos hacen su trabajo y está bien. Pero nosotros queremos que esto se haga ya. No lo esperen otro año, otros 2 años, otros 3 años. No les exigimos rapidez, sino calidad y puntualidad. Eso sí, porque si no se nos está yendo el tiempo y para de aquí a ese tiempo que ustedes piensan hacerlo, Ya más nos morimos de esas contaminaciones. ¿Otra compañera quiere decir algo?
Yeah, thank you, Annabelle. I want to just honor that, validate, right, what you just shared in terms of the reality of these issues. And I want to pass it on to Dora. Did you have any final remarks before we go to Gustavo?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, Gustavo, go ahead.
I think someone else in Annabelle's sphere wanted to say something as well.
Y con lo que dijeron con referente a esperar un mes más para pasar el dinero a las escuelas para darles un mes más, el mes pasado fue exactamente lo que dijeron, que íbamos a darles un mes más para que ellos tuvieran la oportunidad si querían el dinero y si no para pasarlo a otras, a las banquetas o mallas vegetativas, y están diciendo exactamente lo mismo de la otra vez. Pareciera que lo grabaron y lo están repitiendo. Entonces me pregunto yo, ya pasó un mes porque ya estamos en otra junta. Eso significa que si nuevamente dicen lo mismo, así vamos a ir mes a mes a mes y no va a terminar nunca. Entonces, ¿para qué son las juntas? Es otro mes y oímos exactamente lo mismo, como que nos pusieran la grabación del mes pasado. O sea que es algo increíble.
We are not postponing. That is exactly, we heard you, and the last meeting, the commitment was we will give them a month and come back and let you all tell us a final decision. We have never had a consensus or vote on this. Today, I am hearing so far consensus, and Hema, you can correct me if I'm wrong, which is good. That was exactly what we wanted. We either wanted a yes or no. It sounds like yes, let's move it. No more schools, which is great. That is what we wanted to hear. I'm hearing lots of nodding. I definitely see we still have one more comment, but this is great. We will end this meeting, not yet, we still have other decisions, but one of the actions from tonight will be money is now in for a new measure. And that is awesome. That's what we wanted to hear. So it sounds so far we're building consensus. I apologize if there was confusion about this. Is just our way of making sure we hear from you officially, because last month was not official because we still had work to get back to you on.
Jessica, and I want to just honor what was sort of asked, and I want to make sure that we leave with an answer. So I think what I'm hearing from Annabelle's group is in terms of the urgency and maybe a potential timeline, right? So I'm wondering, once there's a vote, for example, if there's a consensus of a yes to this, what are we looking to in terms of a timeline of the implementation? Maybe you can kind of provide some of that to ease some of the urgency.
So this summary slide at the end of the slides that we sent out to everyone summarizes exactly that. So assuming, since it sounds like if recommended, which it sounds like, yes, it's recommended, we will move funds immediately to a new daycare and preschool filtration program. A lot of the comments we've heard today will help us guide what that looks like. We are hoping to take an item, we have to get it to our board, we have to get it approved by CARB. So there are some steps. But it's not going to be a year or 2 years. It will be something that we are going to work on immediately. And immediately there will be no more filtration school measure. It will now be for this measure. So I'm glad that these questions are coming up because we were prepared for them. And this is in the handout that we provided. So I hope that clarifies. So far, I'm hearing consensus. I don't know if Gustavo and Linda's comments are counter to that, or if you just have kind of supporting comments, and maybe I'll just go to you all.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And I do want to give some space for others that we haven't heard from. I'm not sure who raised their hands up first, but correct me if I'm wrong. Linda, and then maybe then Gustavo, so we can hear from others.
I think Gus's was up. Oh, okay. Oh, he's down. Seems fine.
Go ahead, Linda, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for calling on me. I just wanted to ask if the filtration on the other slide that we had going on, is that going to have a program plan?
Yes, sorry, that's what that exactly.
Okay.
It has to have a plan, but we are already working on one because this is happening in other districts or other CSCs, and we will send that out to you all to take a look at to make sure it aligns with all the comments we've heard so far, and we can change or add more.
And because I feel like this conversation has happened for a long time and we've all been asking for it. And I just want to make sure tonight is the final night. We are approved. We're going forward.
Yep.
What is the timeline for our program plan? And when will it go to CARB for approval?
We are hoping to take, so right here, we are hoping to take it to our board in the next couple months. We put October as a timeline. It could be sooner to our board. It will go to CARB's board for approval hopefully within the next month. From there, it does take some time, but this is one of those types of programs that CARB has some familiarity with. It's not kind of a totally brand new type of program. So we're hoping it can be expedited. And I know that Scott will help work with the team. He knows how important this is to you all as well.
Okay, so with that, we've got that one, the vegetative barriers, which is something I have really asked for a long time as well.
Next slide, and if I'm allowed to maybe present on that, is that okay? And I want to kind of finalize this and maybe get to Gus's. Is that okay, Linda?
That's what, or okay, so you want me to speak up when you go onto vegetative barriers?
If that's okay with you, yeah, that would be wrap this one up and feel like we're done with this one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Gustavo, anything with regards to this one before we move to the next one?
Yeah, just very quickly. Yeah, I fully support it 100%. And then my only question is, what is the difference between this measure and the measure that the Valley Air District has that they just rolled out on like the clean air rooms? Yeah.
That is a great question, Gus. And I'll be brief, but I'm happy to, maybe I'll have someone on the team drop into, actually, I don't know who else on my team. Maybe if Brian or Jamie can drop into the chat some information about what I'm about to mention. Basically, the district just released a very pilot program. It actually has the same amount of funding, but for the whole district. So this is all just funding for your community to, as quickly as possible, get some air filtration units into folks that live in disadvantaged communities. We will let you, we can let whoever know when that program is launched. We are working with, and we've invited some of our environmental justice partners to work with us on that pilot program. The difference is that this program has two main things. One is that this $250,000 is just for the Shafter community. The second is that it can be available for daycare and preschool, and maybe it's three things. And the third is that we can work with you all to make the qualifications whatever we need them to be. So maybe we make it to where you get it if you live within proximity to an almond orchard. We can make it to where you only get it if you are low income. We can make it to where you only get it if someone in your household, or you're prioritized higher if someone in your household has asthma. These are all things we can work with you on, and things that we want to quickly get in a project plan in front of you. So there's a lot of more maybe personalization, if you will, than the district program.
Perfect, thank you. So would it be helpful, Jessica, to have kind of a virtual raise of hands in terms of sort of a yes for this?
Sure, yeah. I'm happy to
take a moment for that.
Yeah,
and then I'll have my team kind of record those. So you can thumbs up or a virtual sign if you are
perfect.
If you want a yes for this. We have multiple hands up in the another group. Great.
I don't have a gavel, but I feel like official. We now have a residential air filtration measure. We're so excited. We hear you, and I'm glad we got a chance to go through the process and make sure it is a big deal to move money from a measure that was originally in the search. So I appreciate letting us go through the process. I will move on quickly because even if we don't have time to get through all of them tonight, I still see a good amount of time on the agenda. But we're shifting gears a little bit. You heard us from the last two meetings update you on Locomotive Switchers. It has been open for funding since we adopted the SERP. It is $4.1 million, and it will achieve a good amount of NOx reductions. However, we have not seen, we've worked with manufacturers, so people who sell the switcher locomotives, and with local areas, and there are not, so far, we have not been able to reach any businesses that are interested or even have switchers that operate exclusively within the boundary, which we know is a priority for you all. So based on some feedback from the last meeting, there are two options that we thought we could do with some of the funding. We don't have to completely nix the measure. We can keep working on it. We cannot work on it, based on folks' interest in getting it. One of the thoughts that came up last meeting that we wanted to propose, and I'm happy to provide some feedback on some of the other questions related to this folks had, was to move $1 million to vegetative barriers. This would exclusively work with you all to identify the priority areas where we need to block pollution from the fields. Dora just provided one great example of that, or even from the roads that we've heard from all of you. This is not something that has fallen on deaf ears. We keep hearing you. This measure had $0 in it, and we have heard several times not to add funding. So I will follow up to let you know that one of the questions was, can folks like the folks who own the areas, can they use the funding that they got from the district to plant vegetative barriers? So a little bit of background, and if you have more questions, I do have someone from our incentives team with us, but a little bit of background is that the funding that is given, it's about an average so far of about $60,000 given to pay for equipment that costs way over that, for like tractors, for example. And so that funding is used to pay for that new equipment, that new piece of equipment. The average cost of a really long vegetative barrier project, or a couple of projects that we've seen in our work, can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's because you have to plant a lot of trees. You have to provide a lot of maintenance because it has to block the pollution in such a fashion that there's no gaps in between. And so I'm not saying that folks couldn't, and we can certainly continue as a part of this measure to reach out. But if we want vegetative barriers within the time frame of the SERP, so in the next couple of years, it makes sense to have it funded. And it's something that all of the other SERPs that did want vegetative barriers did put into their SERPs. And so we can make a decision or hear comments today. I do see a couple hands raised, but essentially the options are yes, move funding. We already have $4.1 million. It was going to Locomotive Switchers previously, so we're not taking it from residential measures, or don't move funding, and that's okay too. We're happy to take other options.
Yeah, Jessica, I want to interrupt briefly because we do have a couple of questions on the chat. The first one is from Linda. So will we have this to vote on next meeting? Make sure everything is included so that changes can be ready for the CARB meeting. If you can just address that to stay up to those questions.
We'll have this to vote. So this is to vote right now. And good question about CARB. We actually
that was for the last measure we were talking about.
Oh, I see.
That if that program plan was going to be ready for us to look at as a committee and make sure like the daycares are listed properly, the youth center, the senior center, all of that, if the program plan could be looked at so we can make additions, and then it would go back to you guys so it would be ready, because I think you said that CARB meeting was in October, so I just wanted to make sure that we're on a good timeline.
That's the district meeting, and the district, we can take that just briefly for everyone else. We're going back briefly to the other measure that the district can go to our board before CARB officially approves it. Timing wise, we just need to get approval from our board to create a new program. I don't know about committing to next meeting, but we will get it to you all as soon as possible, previous to another meeting. So we'll send it to the entire committee as soon as it's ready to be released, whether or not there's a meeting coming up or not. So we'll get back to everyone on timeline after today's meeting.
Yeah, thank you. And I have, within the last couple of minutes, several comments on the chat. Angelica Lopez, I think that at this time it wasn't a particularly high priority compared to other high priority projects, but I don't think we exclusively said no. Let me see. And then there's a couple of yes in terms of the vegetative barriers. To make sure if there are any other questions in the chat. Yeah, so we have a couple in terms of the voting for this. Yeah.
Awesome.
Pass it on. Are we open for questions?
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more. Yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and a couple of Michelle, go ahead.
I think we want to bell. Oh wait, go ahead.
You want me to, I can wait. Jessica, the 4.1, if we have no locomotive switchers, there's a couple slides. We're approving $1 million to be moved to vegetative barriers. Is some of the balance of that moved somewhere else? Because, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Question. So right now it would sort of just be, we'll keep it there just to kind of keep the accounting clean. And we can continue to use that and assess anytime we want to use money, we can keep shifting it. It also can help us if we do identify down the road in the next several months that there's an interest, we can use that. 4.1 would aim to replace a handful. So we could still, with the 3.1 remaining, still have funding if there is one that's identified. But yes, it would move 1 million. And so the balance would be 3.1, although you might have seen on further slides, we are also proposing to move funding to add to residential earning, but I'll get to that in a minute. I want to also, just for timeline, in case it helps answer some questions, the one benefit to this, I know it's a question Linda has, is we would not, I don't think, and we'll double check, but we would either not have to go or it would be a very expedited project plan because we did a combined urban greening and vegetative barriers project plan. So even though it wasn't funded, it was already approved by CARB and by the district. So this is a case where if you guys approve it today, it would be available immediately for us to get going on this type of project.
Thank you for that. And I want to make sure I give space to the hands up. Gustavo, go ahead, and then we'll go with Steve and Annabelle.
Yeah, my question is, so there's an allotment of 4.1 million for locomotives that we're now going to debate whether we move. And if we say yes, we're going to allot 1 million to the vegetative barriers. And then what happens to the remainder?
Right now, the remainder will just stay there. It will help us either continue if we want to continue to assess, or later down the line, use that funding to move elsewhere. It just makes more sense other than it just being like a non-allocated funding, if that makes sense.
Got it. So then 1 million from this 4.1 will go to vegetative barriers immediately, and then the rest will, at least for the time being, remain there.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I fully support this.
And awesome, I appreciate that. And just so that folks that are following along on their own presentation, a few slides down, that exact summary exists. So it's essentially taking money and moving $1 million here, and then there's another slide that moves some money to fire replacements, and it kind of shows you the remaining balance of the locomotive switchers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So it sounds like I've got lots of support so far.
Okay, Steve, why don't we get to everyone?
Oh yeah, Steve with the city of Baker or Shafter planning director. I agree with the shifting of the money. I actually had a question about the unallocated 3.1. You've already answered that. I would just say that I think the city is completely supportive of vegetative barriers. I think this committee should have a say in ultimately where they are placed prior to, like, let's say, going out for a contract or something to that effect. I am excited the fact that you already have a mechanism in place so that that can be implemented immediately. And I think that's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Steve, to your point, we would also like to make sure we have like already identified priorities and then we go out to contract. So that's a great point, and we will make sure, if this is something the committee agrees with, which so far we have good support, we would make sure that we get that feedback from everyone.
Thank you. Annabelle, go ahead. Oh, can you unmute yourself? Go ahead. Annabelle.
Gustavo, las 6 personas que estamos aquí, apoyamos que se muevan el millón para las barreras vegetativas y que se mantenga ese proyecto separado de la otra de plantar árboles a través de la comunidad, que sean 2 proyectos completamente separados. Es prioridad para el grupo que está aquí de la comunidad, las barreras vegetativas, para proteger. Obviamente nos da gusto escuchar que la ciudad también quiere hacerlo. Estamos dispuestos en lo que podamos colaborar con la ciudad para que eso pase lo más rápido posible. Pero también lo que dicen las personas aquí es que las barreras vegetativas se hagan para proteger mayormente las áreas residenciales, que no se vaya a hacer fuera de la comunidad, pero que sea para proteger aquí de algo de los pesticidas y del polvo que venga a la comunidad. Y sobre el dinero que va a quedar ahí todavía en el fondo de las locomotoras, una de las ideas que están diciendo aquí pudiera ir a las banquetas, pero entiendo que eso se puede platicar después, pero por ahorita las 6 personas que estamos aquí estamos de acuerdo en que se transfiera el 1,000,000 a las barreras vegetativas.
Gracias, Gustavo. And if we can have my team make that distinction that Gustavo just voiced, is really important to distinguish that. And we do have a question from Angelica on the chat. Jessica, if you can answer, considering it will take place immediately, the vegetative barriers, will we have time or a chance to discuss or plan where we want these barriers placed, right? I'm hearing a little bit of that sentiment of where they will be placed.
Yes, and I'm sorry, when I said immediately, I was meaning sort of like the obligation of going to CARB and district doesn't have to happen, meaning we can immediately start the process of getting that feedback from you all and making sure we take that into account, making sure we hear from you all. It sounds like residential areas. Maybe we do a little map where you guys show us exactly where we want the contractor to consider. We go out for bid for someone to work and to plant those, and we get all of that involved. So this will be separate from the urban greening, just to clarify for the group that's sitting with Annabelle and Gustavo.
Perfect, thank you. If we can note of that, the designer of that map on the tracker, that would be great. Any other questions, concerns with regards to vegetative barriers before we move to the next one?
I'm just curious if we have Steve, again, Esselman with the city of Shafter. Have we voted yet?
I was about to say, I think that's where she was getting at after.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
Yeah, thank you. I'm making sure I hear everyone before we do the virtual vote. Annabelle, did your group have any other questions, concerns before we vote?
Ya, Gustavo, un comentario nada más. Anabel lo mencionó y creo que en juntas pasadas lo hemos mencionado de a qué rancheros se les dio fondos de las 617, ya sea para las cosechadoras de almendra o tractores. Es muy posible que esos mismos que recibieron ya fondos, los rancheros que recibieron fondos, sean los mismos rancheros que están vecinos a la comunidad. Yo creo que sería muy justo que esos rancheros, si ustedes, el distrito, los tiene identificados, saber quiénes son y decirles que si ya recibieron fondos, yo creo que deben de dar para atrás a la comunidad en manera de que estén dispuestos en colaborar, de crear de poner esas barreras vegetativas entre ellos y la comunidad. Yo creo que sería justo que ellos hicieran eso por la comunidad.
Yeah, thank you. And we did hear that earlier. Jessica we put that on the tracker to follow up with the answer to that question that was voiced earlier. So we did make note of that. Thank you. We have, let's see, Angelica Lopez, of course, immediately asked right now. Okay. So it's just a comment. So Michelle, any final comment before we vote?
Just a final comment about the nut harvesters and the vegetation barriers. Those farmers may not be the farmers next door to where we need the vegetative barriers. It just depends on location and who actually got the funding, but I don't know if that link actually may happen. I don't know. It's just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
One other thing I would say is also, I mean, it also depends on where you want to place them so that you can have the maximum effect of, I would say, putting your priority towards residential areas that are being adversely affected by nearby agricultural. So it's really, we gotta look at a map at some point and figure this out, which I think is for another meeting. But right now, let's get this money in place so we can have that conversation. Is really, I think, where we're going with all of this.
Yes, great, thank you. So I think we've noted down the tracker to create the map, and maybe in relation to that question that Gustavo posed of the funding for the rancheros. So with that, I will go ahead and do a virtual vote. If you could raise your hand, if you, or a thumbs up, and then I'll have my team kind of make note of the virtual voting. Okay, wonderful. Perfect.
And to clarify,
we
so
are
that folks are on video, you want to raise your hands
Wonderful.
too.
And I want to just make note that we have 5 minutes, but we want to prioritize this. I want to just do a quick check-in with regards to sort of where we at with time. So I think we're good to keep moving, right, Jessica? Wonderful. So we'll go ahead and pass it back on to you.
Awesome. So far, we've moved money and created a new residential program. We've moved $1 million to vegetative barriers. I have one more. It's been on our list a couple of times, and so today's our decision. Should folks want to, and this is a little bit of a background. I don't have the full background here. We've talked about it a couple of times. Basically, our current residential wood burning program maxes out at $3,000 for natural gas replacement. We propose to increase that to $4,000 per resident. That way, right now we're finding it's about $3,500, meaning most residents are having to pay about $500 out of pocket. It is possible that is why this hasn't moved forward as quickly as we've wanted. And so the proposal was to we did the math and increasing it, but aiming for the same number that we were in the SERP. So it's not changing any of the reduction targets, but it's making it more equitable so folks don't have to pay out of pocket, to take $200,000 from that same locomotive switcher project and add it to the residential wood burning. So this is for residents to receive extra money when they replace their wood burning devices. And so this would require us to go get approval. It should be rather quick because it's a program. We're just changing the funding. And this is something we're looking to do in a lot of communities to make it equitable. And we definitely want to do it with you all if you approve. So with that, I'll take questions.
Before we go to the hands raised, just to acknowledge Linda's comment of agree with Stephen, Michelle, and it needs to be where the need is. So with that, I'll go ahead and I believe the order is Linda, Steve, Michelle.
I was just voting. I'm sorry, I forgot to take my hand down. Sorry about that.
Sorry, that was my hand raised from the last one that never got cleared.
Sorry. Yeah, virtual confusions. Any questions before we go to the voting, Michelle? Did you have
so that leaves me. I actually raised my hand. I just want to tell you, I tried this residential wood burning. Okay, I had my list all prepared and everything and went in there and had to go to Bakersfield, which, for us Shafter people, sometimes, we whine and cry. And so, but I found that 3,000 didn't cover it. I was closer, pretty bare minimum was 4,000. So if we want anybody really to do this, we're going to have to definitely offer the 4,000. So I vote yes. I vote yes when you go to voting.
Okay, wonderful. So I think it's safe to say that we can sort of have a virtual voting. If you want to say yes, thumbs up, or raise your hand, any kind of, and I'll have my team make note of that. We'll give it a second.
Han faltado el respeto, la que haya hablado, aunque sea de Shafter, no ha faltado el respeto.
Annabelle, did you have a question, or I think maybe you accidentally unmuted yourself?
Sí, no escuché bien si la señora que acaba de hablar dijo que las de Shafter estamos llorando. No estamos llorando, simplemente que nosotros habíamos propuesto y se nos hizo buena cantidad los 3,500. Pero si ahorita hay fondos, si nos pueden dar los 4,000, sería perfecto. Y pues hablamos de respeto y pues pienso que ahí hubo una fallita. No es reclamo, es nomás llamada de atención. Gracias.
Yeah, Annabelle, thank you for expressing that sentiment. And I think definitely, apologies for that. And also, I'm glad to hear that the 4.1 million is resonating with you. Any other final comments before I pass it on to Jessica? No? Okay, wonderful.
I was just going to say, I appreciate, this was, I think, one of our most productive meetings. This is a quick slide that I briefly shared earlier. It was sort of manifesting, hoping it would come true. We made a lot of progress. We have moved funding to these measures. We will reflect this in all of the trackers, as well as those visual trackers we owe you. So really, not only did we do this today, but we really solidified some feedback on some better visuals. And we will continue to provide feedback, especially on the ones that require a lot of work still, which is really that new air filtration. But all of these we'll continue to work on and push them forward rather quickly. And so with that, I am done. Somehow we were still right about on time. So I appreciate you, Gemma, for helping move this along.
1 minute over. Oh, no, I spoke too soon. Dora, go ahead before we move to our final pieces.
I just have a comment, and this is about the monitors. Yeah, I wanted to find out if I know the air monitor, the van comes out here, and I'm not sure how often, but I'd like to request that it come out more frequently during the almond harvesting season, and park like on the east side of the colony where we saw that dust. And so it could be monitored more equitably. And then another question I have is there an update on the stationary air monitor that's planned for the colony?
Yeah, I can answer that. We were going to wait. I was thinking wait until the update, but I can just give you a brief update on that as well.
I wanted to make sure before we go, because I do have that on the agenda for the standing updates before we go to that, Chai, if we can, was there any final comment, Annabelle, before we shift?
Sí, gracias por darme la oportunidad. Es para el señor Steve. Queremos que nos dé una cita que sea comprometedora para lo que él guste saber o informarse de la comunidad. Porque después para localizarlo es muy difícil agarrar su teléfono o encontrarlo. Para las barreras vegetativas, para las barreras verdes.
Gracias. Steve, is that something you want to address now, or we can put it on the tracker?
Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. My direct line is 661-746-5021. I will say that I do not speak Spanish. So we would have to, if someone who's speaking Spanish, we have to figure out some way to be able to interpret. But beyond that, yeah, give me a call. I didn't realize that was so difficult to find. I'm sitting there at my desk every day.
Thank you for that. So Steve, if you don't mind, as I'm transitioning to the final, if you can put that phone number on the chat, if that's okay with you. And then if I can have my team maybe follow up in terms of translation, in terms of if anyone needs to call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Call
and I would be happy to work with anyone on the vegetation barriers. Yeah, we certainly need to get them near residential areas. That's really what their effect is for in Shafter. So yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'll get the phone number in the chat.
Okay, perfect. And Annabelle, to address your concern of we're going to put it on the list to have someone available to translate when needing to reach out to Steve, right? Wonderful. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Okay, so now we're going to transition to standing updates. Chai, I want to hand you the mic if you can provide any updates there.
All right, thank you. Before I start again, just wanted to thank Dora for providing us the opportunity to monitor on her property north there, which is significant help considering how hard it was to get the other properties up and going. And so we did get a contractor to come and take a look at that area and get an estimate for it. Basically, we're going to have to rewire get electrical from one of the poles and get it across to that property. So right now we're required to get at least 3 quotes to make sure that we're getting the best quotes onto it. So we're waiting for the remaining quotes, and then hopefully sometime this month we'll get all of that squared away and get all that information, and then we'll be contacting you directly, Dora, on that once we select a contractor and to identify as far as where we're going to put that monitor, the fencing, how all of that is going to work out. So that's the only thing that's left at this point on that. And in regards to your comment and as far as the van monitoring, So typically it's on the, I believe it's on the west side. So are you're recommending that we monitor on the east side?
Yes, typically it's stationed where the sump is, that is on the west side. But the images that I shared, that usually comes from the east side. So, I mean, if he could do both,
Okay.
but move over here to the east side some so we can capture that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll share that with the team and we'll coordinate it for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, and I think we have a question on the chat that I wanted to make sure we address. Any updates on the sidewalks grant for La Colonia from Annabelle?
I was just putting it in the chat, but I'm happy to verbalize just quickly. I did mention at the beginning, and I stand by it, and we got some great feedback today. We would love that to be a topic for next meeting if everyone agrees, because we heard not only we want to provide some feedback and work with the city and the county, but we also heard today some great opportunities about moving some funding, which I think can be part of that conversation. So we plan on that being the August agenda item if everyone's okay with that.
Wonderful, thank you. Chai, want to make sure any other updates or any other questions for Chai?
Yeah, that's it for my update, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chai? No? Okay, so let's go ahead and move for other updates from our other agencies. I want to kind of open it up the space if there are any updates from the community air monitoring. Oh, sorry, Chai did that. From the DPR, the Department of Pesticide Regulations, if there's any updates with regards to that.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Aniela Barant, and I am with the AIR program at DPR, and I'm covering for my branch chief, Min Pham, so who you all know, I think, pretty well. I don't have many updates for you. We are working on the 13D rulemaking, which is still ongoing. We will provide opportunities for public participation when they become available. And other than that, I don't have any updates. But I'm happy to address any questions that this group may have. So thank you so much. Yes, Jessica.
I have a quick question. I know that there were, and we let this committee know about them, there were several listening sessions about the statewide notification efforts a couple weeks ago. Are those recorded, or are there notes that we can share with folks that weren't able to make it, or any sort of follow-up that we can expect that we can share out?
They did record one of the sessions, so I can send you that link that you can share with everybody once it's up, and I'll just have to talk with our communications team and figure out when that is actually going on our website, if it's not already.
Awesome, that would be great. And just so everyone knows, we'll drop that in our tracker so that folks can have that available.
Yeah, great question, Jessica. Annabelle, did you have a question for Aniela?
Gustavo, la pregunta para DPR. Cuando se estaba discutiendo de que se hiciera la notificación para los pesticidas aquí para Chapter y que el comisionado de Agricultura del condado no estuvo disponible, no quiso hacerlo, DPR nos dijo por medio de Yuli que si no se implementaba eso, ¿qué más quisiera la comunidad, verdad? Tratar sobre los pesticidas? Y comentando con el grupo de aquí de Chapter de lo que se aprobó en el proyecto de Arvin Lamont de la 617, de tener conversaciones de cómo mejorar las zonas de protección de los pesticidas alrededor de su comunidad. Estamos mirando de que si es posible, tal vez hasta tener pláticas conjuntas de los dos proyectos de Arvin Lamont y Chapter, de cómo mejorar las áreas de protección en los dos proyectos a la vez. Yo creo que sería hasta más funcional para usar el tiempo de una mejor manera, y nada más queríamos esa pregunta, ¿verdad? Si DPR está dispuesto, y yo creo que también el distrito de aire, ¿verdad? Tal vez, porque en Arvin se mencionó que se va a crear un comité, un subcomité para hablar de los pesticidas, entonces queríamos proponer esa idea si fuera posible de combinar eso con los dos proyectos.
Great question, Gustavo. Aniela, can you address that question, please?
I can try actually. So since I haven't really been part of this process and I'm pretty new to it, I'll just take that question down and talk to the appropriate people such as Min at DPR, and then we can get back to this group here. So I think that
yeah, that's perfect. And I was going to say from the district side, Gustavo, I think that's a really cool concept, right? Is that we're already going to have these discussions. To Gustavo's point, in Arvin Lamont, we are looking to establish a subcommittee. It was a SERP, just so you all know that don't know, we just adopted the Arvin Lamont SERP last month. And one of the next steps was to create a subcommittee to dive into some of the work that DPR is already doing. So I'll work too with you and Min and the DPR team to see that possibility. And we'll take that down as an action item. I think that's really creative. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, sounds good. We'll connect after this meeting about connecting on that subcommittee. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent suggestion, Gustavo. So I'm going to go ahead and any other updates, Aniela, before we move on to the next agency?
No other updates. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here today. We do have a question from Linda, so we'll actually ask that question and move on to any updates from Caltrans. The question is, what about the sidewalks up Central North of Apple Market? Were we working with Caltrans still? Also TRUs, bike lane? So maybe it's a good opportunity to sort of touch base with Caltrans of any updates and answer that question.
And maybe I'll just, right before that happens, I was answering, maybe I'll answer the rest in the chat because I had some updates in the chat related to that. So thanks, Emma. And I think we have our Caltrans partner here, Marcus.
Yes, Marcus Evans, District 6. I am here from Caltrans. I was told by Lorena Mendibles I could talk about the Reconnecting Communities grant. We are not ready to release the information on the walk audit. If you have any questions, please get them to me. I will take notes and make sure they get to management.
So, sorry, can I clarify? So and it sounds like from my understanding too, at maybe the next meeting, we'll have the update from the audit, which I think is going to be great. So I appreciate that. Marcus, can you talk a little bit about what you just said, the Reconnect?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Reconnecting Communities grant, I have that here. Of course, I had it all queued up and then it, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Damn, I had it all queued up and then it went away.
It's okay. Is it something that maybe, do you have a link or something? You can maybe drop it in the chat and that's.
Oh, I found it. I found it. So the notice of funding opportunity for the federal Reconnecting Communities pilot was released on June 30th. The deadline to submit a RCP, Reconnecting Communities pilot applications, to the U.S. Department of Transportation is October 13th. Caltrans is requesting to partner on a local RCP planning grant application. If you want to partner with Caltrans on a local RCP planning grant application, the due date is July 29th. That's July 29th for partnering with Caltrans on a Reconnecting Communities pilot grant. Requesting a Caltrans letter of support for the Reconnecting Communities grant. The deadline is also July 29th. If you have any more questions, you can contact Jimmy Tran or Tracy Frost. I will post all this in the chat.
And I was going to say, I did get a little ahead of you. I did post both the links that I had for the Spanish and English Reconnecting Community sites if folks want to click on that and learn a little bit more.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and Marcus, if you can put those details on the chat for everyone to have access to that. We are at 5 minutes.
Done.
Sorry, that's my son in the background. We are at 5 minutes, so any kind of final questions, remarks for Marcus before we check in with regards to the items in the tracker? No? Wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and conclude within these last 5 minutes. Let me briefly share while my colleague Vanessa gets ready to share the item trackers to ensure we're not missing anything, the sort of dates for the next meetings. So let me share that here. So our next agenda setting meeting is set for July 18th at 3 p.m. And then our next CSC meeting is on August 8th. Jessica, can I confirm those dates with you? Yeah.
That is correct.
Wonderful, perfect. So let me see if there's anything else on the chat. No, and I'm gonna go ahead and now unshare and pass the mic to my colleague Vanessa to share the item trackers. And then this is a good time for you all to add anything that might be missing from those action items. Okay, Vanessa, I'm gonna pass it on to you.
Thanks, Gemma. Am I sharing my screen or am I just reading them out loud? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, can you share your screen for just for visual learners? Thank you.
Sure, give me 1 second. My screen?
If you can zoom in a little, Bonnie.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm gonna unshare and then reshare.
I can pull them up, Bonnie.
Thanks everyone for your patience as we're onboarding new team members to our team. And as you all know, as we're trying to get these up, these are the live action items that we record as you all are talking. So they're not perfect, and by no means are they, do we think they're perfect. So if you have any modifications as they're getting read aloud, please feel free to unmute or put comments in the chat. Vanessa?
All right, thanks, Amy. So there's a few, so please bear with me. As Amy mentioned, I'm going to read them first, and then if you have any clarifications, amendments, or additions, please let me know at the end. So the first action item is that CSC members will review both sets of group agreements and provide any modifications to the facilitators by the August meeting. The second item is that facilitators will not read each group agreement aloud at the onset of the CSC meetings, and that the CSC agrees to adhere to group agreements without having to be reminded at each meeting. The third action item is that the Air District will incorporate the CSC's feedback on the new budget and incentive measures infographics presented today to ensure that they are designed more user-friendly, and the Air District will routinely send out the new infographics as well. In item 4, Air District will provide an update on the types of businesses and, if possible, will provide names of the businesses receiving incentive awards. Item 5, officially moving the funds from school air filtration to residential daycare, community centers, and our senior centers for air filtration equipment for residents. Item 6, the Air District will share project plans for the air filtration measure once it is completed and before the October board meeting for the CSC to review. Item 7, CSC votes to move locomotive measure funding to vegetative barriers. Item 8, Air District will engage the CSC in deciding where the vegetative barrier should be placed. And to help facilitate the selection of placement of vegetative barriers, the Air District will develop a map of potential locations, which will include locations of farmers who have received AB617 funding. Item 9, the CSC votes to move locomotive measures funding to residential wood burning. Item 10, CSC members are requesting that the air monitoring van monitor the area where the almond harvesting is happening on the east side. Item 11, the City of Chapter is happy to collaborate with CSC members, the translation English to Spanish, to discuss the implementation of vegetative barriers. Next item, adding to August agenda, the Sidewalks grant for La Colonia geographic location. Item, Air District will include the recording for the DPR pesticide notification system workshop on the tracker once it is received from DPR. Next, that are merging the subcommittees from Arvin, Lamont, and Chapter to work on pesticide regulation issues. Next item, Caltrans has a new request for a proposal for reconnecting with community grant opportunity, and there will be a direct follow-up. Anybody have any?
Thank you so.
Sorry, does anybody have any clarifications or additions or amendments to the action items?
It's did on the sidewalks, was the Central Valley also in there, Highway 43, or was it just La Colonia?
We can add it. I didn't hear the rest of those neighborhoods. Like, we can add that. Would you like to for us to add that?
Yes, I think it was in the chat. I think Linda asked about that. It was in the chat, not, we didn't just discuss it.
Okay.
Right.
And
And I would clarify.
There's also sidewalks for north of Apple Market, where the residents are right off the 4-lane highway. I don't know if Central 43, it's between Chapter and Wasco. We had talked about it before.
Perfect. Yes. And I was going to say, just so folks know, we have the conversations we've had about sidewalks ongoing. We have those notes, and we are planning to have a more in-depth conversation. So it's good, but don't feel like you have to add. We're happy to take whatever notes, but don't feel like you have to add everything just to this action item. This will just allow us as a jumping point for our meeting in August.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions, clarifications, anything to add to this list? I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We're a little past 7.
Are we going to talk at all about the bike paths and the TRUs? Because the TRUs, I felt like it just disappeared.
So I can, and definitely I'm open as we get to all of our agenda setting meetings to continue to add things to the agenda. Unfortunately, we're not able to talk about every measure at every meeting, but I've noted based on the comment that we'll make sure to bring an update and have a discussion about TRUs at the next meeting. And I meant to clarify earlier, and I did put it in the chat, bike paths and sidewalks will be a part of the next meeting since they're kind of intertwined in the same type of work done by the same type of government agencies. So that will be definitely the next meeting. And at our agenda setting, we're happy to further carve out time with specifics about other items as time allows.
Thank you for that clarification, Jessica. And then we're adding that to the action items. Perfect. Okay, any other final comments with regards to this or anything else before we conclude and close today's meeting?
We have to do public comment.
Any public comments, any final remarks before we end?
So if we can show those slides, Hema, and just to remind folks of our next meeting. And then we can talk about the process for public comment, just to remind folks. I'm not seeing anyone with the P here today. There might be. Oh, and did we miss you, Scott? Did you have an update? I see you.
No, I didn't have an update today. Thanks, though.
Of course, thank you. So yes, I can share my screen now to share that slide. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, these are the dates for our next meeting. And then again, if there are any final public comments, you can raise your hand now or put it in the chat.
And Hema, I'm not seeing any comments on YouTube, so we're good on that end.
Thank you for checking that. Wonderful. So I think we're good. Wonderful, thank you. And apologies for the dinosaur noises my son was making in the background.
I love them.
And yeah, like he wants the paletas. Thank you for everyone's patience.
Thank you, Hema, and thank you all. Have a great night. Thanks for all the engagement.